Europe doesn't have an unemployment problem. It has a worker problem. Millions of jobs exist. Millions of people are needed. Yet companies across Europe cannot find enough workers. Hospitals need nurses. Factories need engineers. Governments need soldiers. This isn't simply another recession. It's a demographic transformation decades in the making. By the end of this documentary, we'll explain why Europe is running out of workers, why the problem keeps getting worse, and why it may become one of the defining geopolitical challenges of the 21st century. In a quiet regional hospital in France, a lone maternity ward nurse manages a double shift. Across the continent, this scene plays out in thousands of variations. Europe's economy is growing at a crawl, yet job vacancies remain historically high. According to Eurostat, the euro area vacancy rate hovered at 2.3% in early 2026, even as the unemployment rate held steady at 6%. In past downturns, hiring collapsed. Today, the opposite is happening. A global Manpower Group survey reveals that over 70% of European employers cannot find the staff they need, identifying labor shortages as their single greatest bottleneck. The problem is no longer a temporary fluctuation of the business cycle. It is a deep-seated structural mismatch, leaving essential frontline services operating with skeleton crews because the workers required simply do not exist. In the early 1970s, a quiet transition began across Europe. Year after year, birth rates fell below the replacement threshold of 2.1 children per woman. What seemed like a temporary post-baby boom dip became a permanent fixture of European life. By 2024, the European Union's average fertility rate hit a historic low of 1.34. As cities grew and housing costs climbed, young adults pursued higher education and delayed family formation, resulting in smaller generations. Simultaneously, medical advancements extended lives, pushing the median age in the European Union to 44 years. This double force, fewer births and longer lives, steadily inverted Europe's population structure. The broad base of young labor that once fueled economic growth has narrowed into a top-heavy column. Today, a shrinking pool of working-age citizens must support a rapidly expanding population of retirees, transforming decades of personal choices into a crisis. The demographic squeeze is now hitting the shop floor. In Germany's industrial heartland, factory managers watched decades of practical know-how walk out the door as the post-World War II generation retires. Replacing a veteran machinist, specialized welder, or structural engineer takes years of hands-on vocational training that modern education systems fail to supply. Shortages now hit healthcare, manufacturing, education, construction, and government administration simultaneously. Meanwhile, labor demand keeps climbing even as economic growth slows. Aging populations require more clinical staff. The green transition needs power grid electricians, and digital transformation forces companies to compete for software developers. From massive rail and road infrastructure updates to rising defense budgets, Europe is attempting an ambitious technological and strategic rebuild, just as the workforce available to build it shrinks to its lowest level in generations. Simply adding more people to the economy is not a complete solution. Across the European Union, 51 million residents between the ages of 20 and 64 currently sit outside the active labor force. This pool consists largely of women, older individuals, and migrants who face systemic obstacles to employment. Structural barriers to part-time work keep another 2.3 million potential workers on the sidelines. Yet, even if these millions were fully integrated, a deeper friction remains. The modern job market requires specialized technical capabilities, advanced engineering expertise, modern healthcare credentials, and digital skills. Unfortunately, local education systems adapt slowly, and weakened vocational pathways have reduced the pipeline of skilled technicians. Retraining the existing workforce requires significant investment and time, meaning many available job seekers simply do not possess the qualifications that employers desperately need. This gap exposes a fundamental reality. The scarcity of workers is compounded by a persistent mismatch of skills. Foreign workers keep Europe's critical sectors functioning, making up roughly 20% of the workforce in agriculture, logistics, and hospitality. Yet, relying on international recruitment to solve the labor shortfall faces stark practical and political hurdles. Governments employ contrasting strategies, from Germany's streamlined skilled visas to Southern Europe's seasonal permits, amid ongoing national debates over immigration. Once inside Europe, workers encounter immediate roadblocks. Eures data reveals that language barriers and complex credential recognition processes prevent qualified foreign professionals from filling vacant roles. Even internal European migration, which historically balanced the workforce, has reached its limit. Following the 2004 European Union enlargement, a massive wave of workers moved from east to west. Today, that reservoir is dry. As wages rise and populations shrink in Poland, Romania, and the Baltic states, these nations now face acute labor shortages of their own, leaving Western economies without their traditional supply of internal migrant labor. Europe is not recruiting in a vacuum. The United States, Canada, and Australia actively target the same skilled professionals, often offering higher salaries and faster career paths that drain Europe's prospective talent pool. Simultaneously, the rise of borderless remote work allows European software developers and engineers to work for foreign employers without ever leaving home. To compensate, European industries have turned to technology. Western Europe leads much of the world in automation, averaging 267 industrial robots per 10,000 employees. But while artificial intelligence and robotics run factory floors and handle administrative tasks, they cannot replace human hands in frontline roles. Healthcare, education, and skilled trades remain stubbornly labor-intensive. Even the most advanced algorithms and automated machinery cannot fully substitute for the physical presence of a nurse, a teacher, or an electrician, leaving Europe's structural shortages unresolved despite its technological edge. This physical constraint on labor now translates directly into macroeconomic stagnation. With fewer hands to build, manufacture, and care, labor has become Europe's most heavily rationed economic resource. The Euro Area Outlook projects a modest potential growth rate of just 1% through 2026, pinned down by rising unit labor costs that erode global competitiveness. The Euro Chamber's economic survey reveals that businesses are postponing capital investments and delaying key infrastructure, housing, and industrial projects simply because they cannot hire the staff to execute them. This thin staffing keeps wages rising, creating persistent inflationary pressure within labor-intensive industries and choking off expansion. This economic squeeze directly erodes national power. As workforces shrink, income tax revenues fall, leaving governments struggling to fund rising pension liabilities and geriatric healthcare. Defense expansion suffers too, stalled by a lack of both public funds and specialized technical personnel. Ultimately, Europe cannot match the demographic scale of the United States or China. Its global position depends on squeezing more productivity from fewer workers, turning demographic structures into the ultimate measure of geopolitical strength. Which long-term fix matters most? Automation, immigration, education reform, or higher workforce participation? Solving this crisis requires a combined package. European nations must raise older worker participation, index retirement ages to life expectancy, and expand childcare. They must also strengthen vocational training, streamline skilled immigration, and accelerate automation. A 17-year-old apprentice in Munich represents this future-facing generation, currently deciding whether to learn a trade, stay, or leave. Each country faces different political constraints and timelines, meaning no single policy will suffice. Europe's survival relies on combining demographic adaptation, education reform, and technological innovation to produce more with fewer hands. Europe's shrinking workforce is no longer just an economic hurdle. It is a quiet rewriting of its societal contract. As the continent adapts, a larger shift looms. Next, we examine how aging populations are reshaping the global balance of power. Subscribe to follow that story.